My beloved child, come close to me. Feel my presence surrounding you like a warm embrace on this quiet evening. I know you're here because your heart is heavy, your mind is restless, and sleep feels like a distant friend who has forgotten your address. But I haven't forgotten you. I never forget my children, especially when they need me most. I am Jesus, and I want to share something beautiful with you tonight. As you lay your head upon your pillow, I want you to know that you are not alone in this darkness. The weight you carry on your shoulders, the thoughts that circle like birds in your mind, the pain that sits in your chest like an unwelcome guest. I see it all and I understand. Tonight, I want to tell you a story. Not just any story, but our story. The story of how my light finds its way into the darkest corners of human hearts. Dissolving sadness like morning sun melts away the frost. This is a story for those who have lived, who have loved, who have lost, and who have learned that life is both beautiful and difficult. You see, my dear one, I didn't come to earth just to teach and heal during my earthly ministry. I came to be with you now, in this very moment, as you struggle to find peace. My light isn't just a metaphor, it's a living presence that can touch your soul and bring you the rest you've been seeking. As we journey together through this story, I want you to breathe deeply. Feel your body sinking into your bed. Feel the tension leaving your muscles one by one. Notice how my voice becomes like a gentle river flowing through your thoughts, washing away the debris of worry and fear. This story we're about to share isn't just for tonight. It's a gift you can return to whenever the world feels too heavy. Whenever sleep seems impossible. Whenever you need to remember that you are loved beyond measure. And perhaps, as you find comfort in these words, you'll feel moved to share this peace with others who might be searching for the same gentle rest you seek tonight. Let us begin this journey together, you and I, as I show you how my light dissolves. The sadness that has taken root in so many hearts, including your own. I remember walking through a garden one evening, long after my resurrection, when the veil between heaven and earth was thin. This wasn't an ordinary garden. It was a place where souls gathered when they couldn't sleep, when their hearts were too full of sorrow to find rest. The garden appeared different to each person who found themselves there. Some saw it as a peaceful meadow filled with wildflowers that glowed softly in the moonlight. Others saw it as a quiet lakeside where gentle waves lapped against a sandy shore. But what everyone saw was the same thing, a place where they could finally breathe. I walked among them, these beautiful souls who had been chosen not because they were perfect, but because they were mine. There was Maria, an elderly woman who had been caring for her husband with dementia for 7 years. Her eyes held the deep fatigue of someone who had given every ounce of her strength to love. There was David, a middle-aged man who had lost his job and was lying awake each night wondering how he would provide for his family. There was Sarah, whose adult children had drifted away, leaving her to wonder where she had gone wrong as a mother. Each person in this garden carried their own unique sadness, their own burden that made sleep feel impossible. But they were all there for the same reason. They had reached the end of their own strength and were ready to let me carry what they could no longer bear. I approached Maria first, sitting beside her on a weathered wooden bench that appeared just as I needed it. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed to recognize something familiar, though she couldn't quite place where she had seen me before. "I'm so tired," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle breeze that stirred the leaves around us. "I love him so much, but I'm so tired." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder, and immediately she felt something shift. The Weight that had been pressing down on her chest began to lift. "Maria," I said softly, "your love for your husband is beautiful, but you were never meant to carry this burden alone. Let me help you." As I spoke, a warm light began to emanate from my touch, spreading through her body like honey through warm bread. This light wasn't harsh or bright, it was gentle, like the first light of dawn that slowly transforms the darkness without shocking the eyes. "I see how you've been trying to be strong for everyone," I continued. "I see how you've been awake at 3 in the morning, worrying about tomorrow, about next month, about next year. But strength isn't about carrying everything alone. True strength is knowing when to rest in my arms." Maria felt tears begin to flow, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of finally being understood, of finally having someone see the depth of her love and the weight of her sacrifice. As each tear fell, I caught it, and each one transformed into a small light that joined the growing radiance around us. "Sleep now," I whispered, and as I spoke, the bench transformed into the most comfortable resting place she had ever known. Her breathing became slow and deep, her shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in months, she felt the sweet embrace of peaceful sleep. But Maria's healing was just the beginning. As she rested, the light that had filled her began to spread throughout the garden, touching each person who was there. This is how my light works. It doesn't just heal one person at a time. It spreads from heart to heart, from soul to soul, creating a network of peace that encompasses everyone who is open to receiving it. David felt the light reach him as he sat by the lake, his head in his hands. The shame he had been carrying about his job loss began to dissolve like salt in water. Sarah, who had been walking a path lined with roses, felt the light touch her heart and suddenly understood that love isn't measured by proximity, but by the depth of care that never fades. As the light continued to spread, I watched as each person's individual sadness began to transform, not disappear, because sadness, like joy, is part of the human experience, but transform into something that could be held without being overwhelmed by it. As the night deepened in our garden of restless hearts, I led my beloved ones to a river that flowed gently through the center of this sacred space. This wasn't an ordinary river. It was formed by every tear that had ever been shed in sorrow, every drop of grief that had fallen from the eyes of my children throughout all of time. But here's what was beautiful about this river. Instead of being a place of sadness, it had become a river of healing. Each tear that had ever been shed in pain had been transformed by my love into something that could wash away the very sorrow that created it. I knelt beside the river's edge and cupped the water in my hands. "Look closely," I said to those who had gathered around me. "What do you see?" At first, they saw only water, clear and clean. But as they looked deeper, they began to see something extraordinary. The water wasn't just reflecting the moonlight, it was filled with light. Every drop contained a tiny star, a small sun, a miniature galaxy of hope. "These are your tears," I explained gently. "Every tear you've ever shed, every moment of pain you've experienced, every night you've spent awake wondering if morning would ever come. They're all here, but they've been transformed." Thomas, a man who had lost his wife just 6 months ago, stepped forward. His face was etched with grief so deep it seemed to have become part of his bones. "I don't understand," he said, his voice hoarse from crying. "How can my tears become something beautiful? They feel like they're drowning me." I stood and placed both hands on his shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. "Thomas, your tears are not your enemy. They are the language of your love. When you cry for your beloved wife, you are speaking the deepest truth of your heart. That love is real, that it matters, that it doesn't end just because someone passes from this world to the next. As I spoke, I guided Thomas to the water's edge. "Cup your hands," I instructed. When he did, I filled them with the luminous water. "Now drink." Thomas hesitated for a moment, then brought the water to his lips. As he drank, something miraculous happened. The grief that had been crushing his chest didn't disappear, but it changed. Instead of feeling like a weight that was pulling him down, it became a bridge that connected his heart to his wife's heart, a bridge that would never be broken. "She's still with you," I whispered, "not in the way she was before, but in a new way. Your love for her has become eternal, and that means it lives in a place where sadness cannot destroy it." Thomas felt something shift deep in his soul. The desperate, clawing sadness that had been keeping him awake night after night began to soften. It was still there. The love for his wife would always be there, but now it felt like something he could carry rather than something that was carrying him away. One by one, I invited each person to drink from the river of transformed tears. Each one experienced their own unique healing, their own transformation of sorrow into something bearable, something that could coexist with peace. Alina, who had been struggling with depression for years, found that the water tasted like hope. Not the false hope that pretends everything is fine, but the real hope that knows darkness is temporary and that light always returns. Her tears of despair became tears of possibility. Robert, who had been carrying guilt about mistakes he had made as a father, discovered that the water washed away the shame that had been poisoning his sleep. His tears of regret became tears of forgiveness, both for himself and from me. As each person drank from the river, I watched their faces transform. The lines of worry began to soften. The tightness around their eyes relaxed. Their breathing became deeper and more regular. The light that had started with Maria continued to grow, spreading from person to person like ripples on the water. But the most beautiful part was what happened next. As they experienced this transformation, they began to reach out to one another. Maria took Elena's hand. David put his arm around Robert's shoulders. Sarah helped Thomas to his feet. Without saying a word, they began to form a circle around the river, each person supporting the others. This is how my light works, my dear child. It doesn't just heal individuals, it creates community. It reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles, that others have walked through similar darkness, and that together we can find our way to the light. As they stood together, I began to speak again, my voice carrying across the water like a gentle melody. You have been chosen not because you are perfect, but because you are willing to be transformed. Your sadness does not disqualify you from my love, it makes you ready to receive it more fully. The river continued to flow, carrying with it all the transformed tears, all the healed grief, all the renewed hope. And as it flowed, it sang a lullaby that only the heart can hear. A song of love that never ends, of peace that surpasses understanding, of rest that comes to those who are weary. As our journey continued through the sacred landscape of healing, I led my beloved ones down a gentle slope toward a valley that stretched out before us like a vast, soft blanket. This was the Valley of Shadows, a place that every human soul must walk through at some point in their earthly journey. But tonight, this valley was different. Instead of being filled with darkness and fear, it was illuminated by a gentle, golden light that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself. The shadows were still there. They hadn't been erased or denied. but they had been transformed into something that could no longer harm those who walked through them. "I know this place," whispered Anna, an elderly woman who had joined our group. She had been struggling with illness for years, and the fear of death had been stealing her sleep night after night. "I've been walking through this valley in my dreams, but it was always so dark, so frightening." I walked beside her, my presence a constant comfort. "Yes, my dear Anna, this is the valley that David wrote about in his psalm. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." But look around you now. What do you see? Anna looked with wonder at the transformed landscape. Where once there had been thorns, now there were flowers that glowed with soft light. Where once there had been treacherous paths, now there were smooth walkways that seemed to guide each step. Where once there had been the howling of wind that sounded like despair, now there was the gentle sound of my voice speaking words of comfort. "The shadows are still here," she observed with amazement. "But they're not dark anymore. They single quotes, beautiful." "That's right," I said, my voice filled with joy at her understanding. "The shadows in your life, the illness, the fear, the uncertainty about tomorrow, they haven't disappeared, but they no longer have the power to terrify you. They have become part of the beautiful tapestry of your story." As we walked deeper into the valley, I began to share with them the mystery of how shadows are transformed by light. In the natural world, I explained, a shadow is simply the absence of light. But in the spiritual realm, shadows are not empty spaces, they are places where light has the opportunity to shine even brighter. I paused beside a tree whose branches created intricate patterns of light and shadow on the ground. "Look at this tree," I said. "See how the shadows make the light more beautiful. Without the shadows, the light would be plain, ordinary. But with the shadows, the light becomes art, becomes poetry, becomes something that takes your breath away." Marcus, a man who had been battling addiction for years, stepped forward. His face was marked by years of struggle, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope. "Jesus," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I've made so many mistakes. I've hurt so many people. How can my shadows become beautiful?" I turned to face him fully, and as I did, my light seemed to intensify, surrounding him with warmth and acceptance. "Marcus, your struggles with addiction are not your identity. They are part of your story, but they are not the end of your story. Every time you've fallen and gotten back up, every time you've chosen to try again, every time you've reached out for help, those moments have created shadows that make the light of your recovery even more brilliant." As I spoke, I reached out and touched the deepest shadow that seemed to cling to Marcus's heart. The moment my light touched it, the shadow began to transform. Instead of being a dark stain of shame, it became a gentle reminder of his humanity, of his capacity for growth, of his courage to keep trying. "Your addiction taught you about the depths of human struggle," I continued. "It broke your heart open and made you compassionate toward others who were suffering. It showed you that you need help, that you need community, that you need me. These are beautiful gifts, Marcus, even though they came through pain." Tears began to flow down Marcus's face, but these weren't tears of shame or despair. They were tears of recognition, of finally understanding that even his darkest moments could be woven into something beautiful by my love. One by one, I walked with each person through their own shadows. With Elena, I showed her how her depression had given her a depth of empathy that allowed her to comfort others who were struggling. With Robert, I revealed how his mistakes as a father had taught him about grace and forgiveness in ways that perfection never could have. With Thomas, I demonstrated how his grief was actually a testament to the power of love, and how that love would help him connect with others who were mourning. As we continued our journey through the valley, something extraordinary began to happen. The shadows that had been transformed by my light began to create the most beautiful patterns on the ground. Each person's healed pain, each transformed struggle, each redeemed mistake created its own unique design of light and shadow. These patterns began to connect with one another, forming a vast tapestry that covered the entire valley floor. It was like a quilt made of light, each square representing a different person's journey through darkness into hope. "Do you see?" I asked, gesturing to the magnificent sight before us. "Your individual struggles, when touched by my light, don't just heal you, they contribute to the healing of the whole world. Your transformed shadows become light for others who are still walking in darkness." Anna, who had been so afraid of death, now found herself filled with peace. "I understand now," she said softly. "Death isn't the end of the story. It's just another shadow that you transform into light." The group stood together in the middle of the valley, surrounded by the beautiful patterns of light and shadow. Each person's burden now transformed into something that could be carried with grace. The valley that had once been a place of fear had become a place of beauty, a place where the chosen ones could rest and find peace. As the night deepened around us, I began to sing a gentle lullaby, my voice carrying across the valley like a warm breeze. The melody was simple, but it carried within it all the love I had for each person, all the hope I had for their future, all the peace I wanted them to carry in their hearts. "Rest now, my beloved ones," I whispered. "Let the transformed shadows of your lives become a soft blanket that covers you with comfort. Let the light we have created together guide you into peaceful sleep." And as they rested there in the valley of shadows made light, each person felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. The deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing that every part of their story, even the painful parts, had been touched by divine love and transformed into something beautiful. As the night continued to unfold around us, I led my beloved ones up a gentle hill that rose from the valley floor. At the top of this hill stood a lighthouse unlike any they had ever seen. It wasn't made of stone or brick, but seemed to be constructed from pure light itself, solid yet radiant, ancient yet eternally new. "This is where I want to bring you next," I said, my voice filled with anticipation. "This is the lighthouse of eternal presence, where you can learn the secret of never being truly alone, no matter how dark the night becomes." As we approached the lighthouse, its light began to pulse gently, like a heartbeat made visible. The beam that emanated from the top didn't sweep across the landscape like an ordinary lighthouse beam. Instead, it seemed to reach out specifically to each person, enveloping them in a warm, personal glow. "I don't understand," said Catherine, a woman who had been struggling with loneliness since her children moved away and her husband passed. "How can this light be touching all of us individually at the same time?" I smiled at her question, remembering how often people struggled to understand the nature of divine love. "Catherine, this is how my presence works. I am not limited by the physical laws that govern earthly things. I can be fully present with each person simultaneously, giving each one my complete attention, my complete love." We entered the lighthouse through a door that seemed to open before we even reached it. Inside, the space was vast and welcoming, filled with comfortable chairs and soft cushions, each one perfectly suited to the person who would sit in it. The walls were transparent, allowing the light to flow freely, and through them, we could see the entire journey we had taken together. The garden, the river, the valley, all connected and all beautiful. "Sit down, my dear ones," I invited. And as they did, each person found their seat to be exactly what they needed. For some, it was a soft armchair that cradled their tired bones. For others, it was a simple cushion on the floor that allowed them to feel grounded and present. For Marcus, it was a sturdy chair that gave him the sense of stability he craved. When everyone was settled, I began to share with them the mystery of my eternal presence. "Many of you have felt alone in your struggles," I began. "You've lain awake at night feeling as though the whole world was sleeping peacefully while you wrestled with your worries. You've walked through your days feeling invisible, unimportant, forgotten." Nods of recognition rippled through the group. This was a pain they all knew intimately, the deep ache of feeling isolated in their suffering. "But here's what I want you to understand," I continued, my voice gentle but firm. "I have never left you. Not for a moment. Not even when you couldn't feel me, couldn't hear me, couldn't see any evidence of my presence. I have been with you through every sleepless night, every anxious day, every moment of despair." I stood and walked to the center of the room, where a soft light began to emanate from my heart. This lighthouse represents something that has always been true but isn't always visible. My presence with you is not dependent on your ability to perceive it. It's not dependent on your faith being strong or your prayers being perfect. It's simply there, constant as the stars, reliable as the sunrise. As I spoke, the light from my heart began to expand, filling the entire lighthouse with a warmth that seemed to penetrate not just their bodies, but their very souls. In this light, they could see something remarkable, threads of light connecting each of them to me, and threads connecting each of them to one another. "You see," I explained, "you are part of a vast network of love. Every person who has ever turned to me in their pain, every soul who has ever cried out for help, every heart that has ever longed for peace, they are all connected to this lighthouse and through it to each other." Sarah, who had been struggling with the distance from her adult children, suddenly understood something profound. "You mean, when I'm praying for my daughter at 2 in the morning, worried about her marriage, I'm not alone in that worry?" "Exactly," I said, my face lighting up with joy at her understanding. At that very moment, there might be another mother in another part of the world praying for her daughter's happiness. There might be a father lying awake, worried about his son's future. There might be a grandmother asking me to protect her grandchildren. You are all connected in this web of love and concern. The light in the lighthouse began to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, and suddenly each person could feel it, the presence of countless others who were also seeking peace, also struggling with pain, also hoping for healing. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by this awareness, they felt comforted. They were part of something larger than themselves, part of a community of souls that transcended time and space. "This is why I chose you," I said, my voice filled with infinite tenderness. "Not because you were perfect, but because you are willing to be connected. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to ask the questions. Not because you never struggle, but because you're willing to keep reaching out for help." Alina, who had been battling depression, felt something shift in her understanding. "Jesus," she said softly, "when I'm in my darkest moments, when I can't even pray, you're still there." "Especially then," I replied. "When you can't find words, I hear the cry of your heart. When you can't feel my presence, I am holding you even closer, when you think you failed me. I am already working to turn your struggle into strength. As the night progressed, I shared with them story after story of my presence in their lives, moments they had forgotten, times when they had narrowly avoided danger, occasions when exactly the right person had appeared at exactly the right moment, instances when they had found strength they didn't know they possessed. That job interview that went better than expected. I was there, giving you confidence. That moment when you chose not to give up. I was there, strengthening your resolve. That stranger who smiled at you on your worst day. I was there, showing you that you matter. One by one, they began to remember. Small moments, tiny miracles, quiet interventions that they had attributed to coincidence or luck. Now they could see them for what they really were. Evidence of a love that never sleeps, a presence that never abandons, a light that never dims. The lighthouse continued to pulse with gentle light, and as it did, each person felt their anxiety beginning to ebb away like a tide retreating from the shore. The sleeplessness that had brought them to this sacred place was being replaced by a deep, abiding peace. Rest now, I whispered, knowing that this lighthouse will always be here for you. Whenever you feel alone, whenever you can't sleep, whenever the darkness seems too deep, remember this place. Remember that my presence with you is not a feeling that comes and goes. It's a fact that never changes. As they settled deeper into their chairs, surrounded by the gentle light of eternal presence, each person felt something they had been searching for their entire lives. The absolute certainty that they were loved. They were seen. They were never alone. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, I led my beloved ones from the lighthouse to one final destination, a garden that existed at the very edge of night and day, where endings transform into beginnings, and where every conclusion becomes a new commencement. This garden was different from the one where we had first met. While that garden had been a place of healing for tired souls, this garden of new beginnings was a place of hope, where the seeds of tomorrow were planted in the soil of today's transformed pain. Every ending is also a beginning, I said, as we walked through an archway made of flowering vines. Every closed door creates space for a new door to open. Every goodbye makes room for a new hello. The garden was laid out in gentle spirals, each path leading to a different area where new life was taking root. There were sections for new relationships, new purposes, new dreams, new understandings. But what made this garden truly special was that every plant, every flower, every tree had grown from something that had once been broken. Look closely, I invited them, kneeling beside a rose bush that was blooming with extraordinary beauty. This rose grew from the tears that Maria shed while caring for her husband. Each tear became a seed, and each seed has become a flower that will bring beauty to others. Maria approached the rose bush with wonder, touching the petals gently. "These are really from my tears?" she asked, amazement in her voice. "Your tears of love, your tears of exhaustion, your tears of fear. They weren't wasted, Maria. They were planted here in this garden, waiting for the right time to bloom into something beautiful. And now, others who are walking the same path you've walked will be able to find comfort in the beauty that grew from your pain." We moved to another section of the garden, where Thomas stood before a tree that seemed to glow with an inner light. "This tree grew from your grief," I explained, gently. "Every night you spent missing your wife, every moment you felt lost without her, every tear you shed, they all became part of this tree. And now, look at what it's producing." Thomas looked up and saw that the tree was bearing fruit. Not ordinary fruit, but fruit that seemed to contain light itself. This fruit will nourish others who are grieving, I continued. Your pain has been transformed into something that can heal others who are walking through the same valley you've walked. As we continued through the garden, each person discovered something that had grown from their own struggles. Marcus found a fountain that flowed with crystal clear water, representing his journey to sobriety and the hope he could now offer to others struggling with addiction. Alina discovered a field of sunflowers that had grown from her battles with depression, flowers that would always turn toward the light, no matter how dark the day. But how do we take this with us? Asked Robert, who had found a workshop where broken things were mended and made more beautiful than they had been before. This garden is wonderful, but our real lives are waiting for us when we wake up. I smiled at his question, understanding the practical concern behind it. Robert, this garden isn't separate from your real life. It is your real life. Every morning when you wake up, you have the choice to remember that your struggles are not dead ends but seeds. Every day, you can choose to see your pain as compost that will nourish new growth. I led them to the center of the garden, where a large fountain bubbled with water that seemed to contain every color of the rainbow. This is the fountain of new beginnings, I said. Every day, you can come here in your heart and be reminded that today is a new day, that yesterday's failures don't define today's possibilities, that every sunrise is my gift to you of another chance. One by one, I invited them to drink from the fountain. As they did, they felt something wonderful happening in their hearts. The weight of their past mistakes began to lift. The fear of their uncertain futures began to dissolve. The pain of their present struggles began to transform into a quiet confidence that they could handle whatever tomorrow might bring. This is what it means to be chosen, I said, as they stood together around the fountain. It doesn't mean you're perfect or that you'll never struggle again. It means you're chosen to be part of the great work of transformation, turning pain into beauty, sadness into joy, endings into beginnings. Anna, who had been so afraid of death, now looked at me with eyes full of understanding. Death isn't really an ending, is it? She asked. It's just another beginning. That's right, Anna. Death is simply the doorway from one garden to another. The love you've planted here, the beauty you've created, the lives you've touched, those things are eternal. They continue to grow and bloom long after the gardener has moved on to tend other gardens. As the sun began to rise in earnest, casting golden light across the garden of new beginnings, I gathered my beloved ones for one final blessing. You came to me tonight carrying heavy burdens, I said, and you will leave carrying seeds of hope. You came feeling alone, and you will leave knowing you are part of an eternal family. You came seeking rest, and you will leave with the ability to find peace even in the midst of struggle. I placed my hands on each of their heads, blessing them with the light that dissolves all sadness, the peace that surpasses understanding, and the love that never fails. Go now, I whispered, and remember that every night when you close your eyes, you can return to this garden. Remember that every morning when you wake up, you have the opportunity to plant new seeds of hope in the soil of your daily life. As they prepared to leave the garden, each person felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: excitement about tomorrow. Not because they knew it would be easy, but because they now understood that even the difficult tomorrows could be transformed into something beautiful by the light of my love. The garden gate opened before them, and beyond it lay the path back to their ordinary lives. But they were no longer ordinary people. They were chosen ones, carriers of light, gardeners of hope. living examples of how sadness can be dissolved and transformed into something beautiful, as my beloved ones prepared to return to their earthly rest. I walked with them one final time along a path that led from the Garden of New Beginnings back to their beds, their pillows, their quiet rooms where sleep had so often eluded them. But something had changed. The path they walked now was smooth and straight, lit by a gentle light that seemed to come from within their own hearts. The anxiety that had driven them from their beds was gone, replaced by a deep sense of peace that settled into their bones like warm honey. "Do you feel it?" I asked as we walked together. "The change in your hearts?" They nodded, each one aware of the transformation that had taken place during our journey together. The restlessness that had plagued them for so long had been replaced by a quiet confidence, and knowing that they were held in love that would never let them go. "This peace you're feeling," I continued, "it's not just for tonight. It's a gift that will remain with you. Every time you close your eyes, you can remember this journey. Every time sleep feels elusive, you can recall the garden, the river, the valley, the lighthouse. You can remember that you are chosen, that you are loved, that you are never alone." As we approached the end of our path, I could see their beds waiting for them, each one now transformed into a sanctuary of rest. The sheets seemed softer, the pillows more inviting, the darkness more comforting than frightening. "Before you go," I said, stopping at the threshold between the spiritual garden and their physical world, "I want to give you one final gift." I reached into my heart and pulled out what looked like small seeds of light, one for each person. "These are seeds of peace," I explained. "Plant them in your hearts, and they will grow into trees of rest that will shelter you every night for the rest of your life." As each person received their seed of peace, they felt it take root immediately in their hearts. The light spread through their bodies, relaxing muscles they hadn't realized were tense, calming thoughts they hadn't noticed were racing, soothing spirits they hadn't known were restless. "Now," I said gently, "go to your beds. Lie down with the knowledge that you are completely safe, completely loved, completely at peace. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Let your bodies sink into the comfort of your mattresses. Let your minds rest in the certainty of my love." One by one, they moved toward their beds, and as they did, I blessed each one with a final touch of my hand. "Sleep well, Maria. Your caregiving is held in my love, and your rest is my gift to you. Sleep well, Thomas. Your grief is transformed into a bridge of love that will never be broken. Sleep well, Marcus. Your recovery is a testimony to the power of second chances. Sleep well, Elena. Your struggle with depression has given you a depth of compassion that will heal many hearts." As they settled into their beds, I remained with each one, my presence a gentle blanket of love that covered them from head to toe. I sang to them a lullaby that had been sung since the beginning of time, a song of love that never ends, of peace that passes understanding, of rest that restores the soul. "Close your eyes," I whispered, and as they did, they could still see the light that had filled our journey together. "Breathe deeply," I continued, and with each breath, they felt themselves sinking deeper into peace. "Rest now," I concluded, "knowing that I am with you always, that my love never sleeps, and that every night when you close your eyes, you can find me waiting in the garden of your heart." The night sounds around them, the gentle hum of air, conditioning, the distant sound of crickets, the soft whisper of wind through trees, all became part of a symphony of peace that carried them deeper into rest. Each person felt their breathing naturally slow and deepen as they remembered the journey we had shared. The weight of their worries, which had seemed so heavy just hours before, now felt light as feathers. The fears that had kept them tossing and turning were transformed into a gentle awareness of my constant presence. "I am here," I whispered to each one individually, my voice becoming part of their dreams. "I am here in your rest. I am here in your peace. I am here in your healing. Sleep. Let my love be the last thing you remember as you drift off, and let it be the first thing you feel when you wake." As sleep finally claimed them, each person carried with them the seeds of peace I had planted in their hearts. These seeds would grow while they slept, sending roots deep into their souls, creating a foundation of rest that would serve them for years to come. And in their dreams, they returned to the garden, the river, the valley, the lighthouse, all the places where their sadness had been dissolved by light, where their pain had been transformed into beauty, where their loneliness had been replaced by the certainty of love. The night embraced them like a gentle mother, and sleep came at last. Not the fitful, restless sleep they had known before, but the deep, healing sleep of those who know they are completely safe in the arms of perfect love. My beloved child, as our journey together comes to an end, I want you to know that this is not really an ending at all. It is a beginning, the beginning of a new relationship with sleep, with peace, with the knowledge that you are eternally loved. Tonight, as you close your eyes and lay your head upon your pillow, remember that you carry within you all the light we discovered together. The garden of healing is always accessible to your heart. The river of transformed tears continues to flow with hope. The valley of shadows has been made bright with understanding. The lighthouse of my presence continues to shine, guiding you home to peace. You are chosen, dear one, not because you are perfect, but because you are mine. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to trust. Not because you never struggle, but because you are willing to let your struggles be transformed into something beautiful. Sleep now, knowing that my light dissolves all sadness, that my love conquers all fear, and that my peace surpasses all understanding. Rest in the certainty that you are never alone, that every night offers new hope, and that every morning brings fresh mercies. Sweet dreams, my beloved. Until we meet again in the garden of your heart, know that I am with you always, loving you eternally, blessing you abundantly. Sleep well, my chosen one. Sleep well.